But of course, we will begin with a scene in court today. Donald Trump is defending his business practices in the city where he first rose to fame building his real estate empire. The judge has already ruled that the former president committed fraud for years. And today he repeatedly warned Trump to keep his answers short, even at one point saying, quote, "This is not a political rally." So joining us now for more is our ABC News contributor and historian, presidential historian, Mark Updegrove. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And, you know, it was really interesting to hear from our reporters how this all played out in court today. And for the first time, we're seeing this presidential contender, you know, on the witness stand in his own defense. Have we ever seen anything like that in America?
We have. We've seen other presidents testify as defendants throughout history. Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, Theodore Roosevelt, Bill Clinton. But we haven't seen anything quite like this, Kenna. This is Donald Trump talking about his businesses. None of those other presidents were talking about business interests. In this case, Donald Trump and the fraud that he perpetrated relating to his business practices is in New York. So there's a slightly different nature here. We have television too. It's you can see Trump coming out of court and making statements about the proceedings. We haven't seen that before from presidents in real time. We see Donald Trump commenting on what has happened inside the courtroom. So this has as so many other things with Donald Trump, has an unprecedented nature to it.
Certainly does. That's a word that we keep hearing anytime it comes to him, right? But, you know, Trump and his allies keep saying that essentially this is like political persecution. So is there validity to that line of thinking?
Well, I don't think so. These are legitimate charges that have been brought up. For Trump, this is one of 91 felony counts that we've seen from Donald Trump. Donald Trump happens to be a candidate for president, but I don't think there's any evidence, given the wide-ranging nature of all these cases, that this is some sort of concerted effort to defeat Donald Trump's candidacy as president of the United States in 2024, Kana.
And we certainly know, I mean, in other cases as well, he feels like the DOJ and other prosecutors are, you know, sort of being weaponized against him. But, you know, he talked in court today about how his brand, this Trump name, is really the most valuable thing about him. So how could that be affected by the outcome of this case?
Well, there's no question it's the most valuable thing to Trump's identity. Trump most identifies himself as a wealthy, successful businessman. So it really hurts in that regard. But I don't think it seems to be hurting him politically, Kane. I mean, this is somebody, again, who has 91 felony counts against him. He has been impeached twice. He has the stain of January 6th on his hands, and yet it doesn't seem to hurt him politically. In fact, in some ways, this plays into the deep state, everyone's out to get me narrative that has played so well for Donald Trump politically. He is saying essentially to his followers, this is happening to me, and you know what? I'm going to defend myself so that it doesn't happen to you.
Exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth there. And we see this over and over again. These things sort of embolden his base. But if he's convicted in any number of these trials, what do you think that would mean for him politically?
Again, it's hard to say, because for any other person, at least in modern presidential elected politics, this would have hurt considerably. This might have defeated anybody else who had these charges leveled against them. But in Donald Trump's case, what doesn't kill him seems to make him stronger. Again, it seems to add to that narrative that is so politically potent. It seems to resonate so effectively with his base.
It clearly does. Mark, don't go anywhere. I want to bring in the rest of our panel. Joining us today is ABC News contributor and SiriusXM radio host Mike Muse, ABC News legal contributor and University of Baltimore law professor Kimberly Whaley, and ABC News executive editorial producer John Santucci, all, of course, joining us along here with Mark. So, Kim, let's start with you. We saw something else today in this case in New York, that Trump essentially acknowledging in open court that he overvalued some of his properties. This is something that you have seen real estate moguls do for sure. He doesn't stand alone in there, but it seemed to really surprise the prosecutors, that admission.
Well, they're trying to get him to admit that he did over or undervalue. That's obviously central to the case. The court's already held in a summary judgment ruling back in September that is the case. But so I think what they're getting to is the question of intent to somehow defraud or deceive, and saying, listen, this happens all the time. I didn't mean to do anything illegal, because in business, sure, you overestimate, you underestimate. So I think this is an attempt to get at that standard for intention and also materiality. The question being, did the misstatements actually dupe these banks? And saying, no, we all know this is how the game is played. So whatever the standard is, the threshold is for fraud and misconduct, Donald Trump, did not violate it here.
Right. He went on to say essentially the banks weren't hurt, that there was no victims in his opinion here. And John, to you, I'd love to have you respond to something that Mark said about the former president, that almost, whatever doesn't kill him only makes him stronger. What's your response to that?
Yeah, well, I heard Mark say that and say, well, he's got a couple good points there. I mean, look, Donald Trump has been through a lot. I mean, one time, Kane, I remember he said to me, I've had a really interesting life. And you really can look at Donald Trump's life. I've often said, the show on Netflix, The Crown, how it does every season is a decade of Donald Trump's life. He's had a lot of ups and downs, right? I mean, Donald Trump has failed, he's won, he's failed again and come back again. And if you look at his political career in the last 8 years of his life, I mean, it's almost 8 years now that he's since gone down the escalator. He's definitely had wins, 2016 campaign, losses, 2020 campaign. He's had legal setbacks, and now look at what's going on. This collision course right now of Donald Trump, the businessman, and Donald Trump, the politician, all getting tried in multiple courtrooms is fascinating. The case right now, though, I think is the most striking because it gets at the heart of what Donald Trump is. And if you look at his business, if you look at his time, especially in the 90s, Donald Trump will tell you himself, he crashed and burned in the 90s. He basically had to sell everything. But this is the difference, though, between then and now. He was able to rebound. He found a path. The Celebrity Apprentice, the show on NBC, did help him rebound here. What gets him out of this if there is a conviction of fraud, if he does have to close up shop in New York? And I think that really is where things are different, because where Donald Trump has been able to pivot in the past, he still has held on to his roots, right? The guy in New York that made it. If this goes away, if the New York image is stripped away from Donald Trump, you got to wonder, in a sense, what's left? Because that image, Donald Trump said it himself today in court, that image is what got him the presidency.
Yeah, and Mike, I'd actually love for you to respond directly to that, to this image that he has so carefully cultivated over these decades. And, there weren't cameras in the courtroom today, so no one could see this, testimony that was pretty intense, according to our reporters. No one's actually able to see that play out on camera. They are seeing him walk out of the courtroom, though. So Mike, what is your response to that, this image that's at risk here?
Yeah, image is everything for former President Donald Trump. And I think that he recognized that, although internally this may be impacting him in terms of the New York business community, philanthropic community within the city, and the real estate development community is having an impact him. But when it comes to the public's opinion, no one knows how to do television like former President Donald Trump, which is why you see after leaving the courtroom each time, he goes straight to camera. And as he goes straight to camera, he knows that the American audience just is not aware of the difference oftentimes between civil and criminal cases, and particularly this type of civil case, which is very much about financials, which can be very complicated for the average person who doesn't follow this every day to follow along. And so what he does is he goes and he plays the victim. It makes this about a political witch hunt, which Kane is actually paying off for him. If you look at the recent New York Times poll that shows him ahead of President Biden in the head-to-head matchup in the battleground states, except for one, which is Wisconsin. And so he is actually winning in the court of public opinion, and he knows how to produce an audience and statements to his advantage.
He's winning hugely. John, you keep nodding there and agreeing. You want to add?
No, I mean, listen, I think that Donald Trump, obviously, as Mike just said, look, this is the guy that so much wanted to make it in Manhattan, right? I think that, we talk about that image of him, Big thing for Donald Trump back in the 70s, Kano, was to do better than his dad, right? The Trump family had built a business in Brooklyn and Queens, but it was Donald Trump that wanted to be in Manhattan. And Mike talked about, Donald Trump in real estate. You think about two images of Donald Trump that come to my mind anyway. The first is him also in the late 80s in a helicopter with Barbara Walters flying over the skyline and talking about the impact he wanted to make on it. But the other images I think you come through to Donald Trump is iconic New York places, right? Donald Trump talked about how he saved Waltman Rink and was able to go in and save Mayor Ed Koch years ago because he came in and did it under budget and below schedule, right? He was proud of that. He used that story often on the campaign trail. Around the holidays, Kana, I know you and I both have kids. I know mine are watching Home Alone 2, seeing Donald Trump, who once owned the Plaza Hotel, saying down the hall and to the left, referring to the lobby. It's so synonymous with his name. So I think if any of it is pulled out from him, I just don't think we've seen this former president react to loss in a way outside of the 2020 campaign that he couldn't let it go. But this would actually be physically something taken away from him. To have to sell that building on Fifth Avenue, the hotel that overlooks Central Park, I just don't think we've actually seen Donald Trump grieve a real loss. And I think this one in particular, it would just be something that we couldn't even imagine possible. But if this judge is going to rule the way he has on summary judgment, it's a matter of when, not if.
Right. And Mark, as you're listening to John sort of reminisce there, I mean, how will historians remember this moment in Trump's life?
I think John is dead right. This literally hits, if he's convicted, this literally hits Donald Trump where he lives. Donald Trump identifies as a New Yorker. The success he's most proud of is by making his mark on Manhattan, where his father had not gone into real estate dealings. As John mentioned, they were in the boroughs. They were in Queens and the Bronx, but not in Manhattan. That was the shiny jewel that Donald Trump himself conquered. And I don't think Donald Trump would have been president but for The Apprentice. And The Apprentice is Donald Trump as the emblem of American business, sitting in Manhattan, the seat of American business. So this really hits not only Donald Trump where he lives, literally the Trump Tower and such, but also his identity, his self-identity.
Certainly. Wow, it's so interesting. I know you'll be covering this for us, John, and it sounds like he'll be taking the stand again as well. So Mike, Mark, Kim, and John, thank you as always for your time.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.